monsoon season in Dhofar, an annual festival of nature. People march from everywhere to enjoy its captivating beauty. But there is a small creature causing a big disturbance. Dhofari biting midges, or as known scientifically, Forcipomyia whitcombei, and known locally as Airnout. These little midges and little insect has made so much trouble to locals and tourists coming to the region. Let's know more about it together.
Hello, I'm Robert Whitcombe. I'm an ecologist. Many years ago, I did a doctorate on the honeybees and wild flora of Oman. And then from 1985 to 1992, I went to work in the southern region of Dhofar for an interesting organisation called the Planning Committee for Development and Environment in the Southern Region, or the Governorate of Dhofar, as an environmental specialist and planner, looking at the long-term future of Dhofar and its environment. The Governorate of Dhofar is absolutely unique in Arabia. Every year for 2 to 3 months, from the end of June to the beginning of September, the mountains are enveloped in the Khareef, or fog, of the monsoon, which is generated by an upwelling of cold water in the Arabian Sea. And this brings cloud and very unusual rain for Arabia onto the mountains. The mountains have a unique flora. Many plants are only found in this part of Arabia. Now, as well as the plants, there are also some unusual fauna found in the mountains. And when I started working in the mountains in the summer of 1985, in the monsoon season, I very soon experienced the local biting midge, or Airnout, which reminded me of the midges that are found in Scotland, for those who are familiar with the West Coast, where again in summer and autumn, thousands of these small biting insects will descend on humans and suck their blood. These midges in the mountains of Dhofar were found only in the monsoon season, and it was fairly obvious that they were going to be different from the midges I was familiar with in the mountains of Scotland.
So in the 1985 and 1986 monsoon seasons, I ventured out onto the mountains of Dhofar on a number of occasions to collect midges and make observations on the weather conditions when they were active. In 1985, I collected specimens from Wadi Hinna on the eastern escarpment of the Dhofar Mountains between Tawi Ater and Mirbat. Then in 1986, I went to Radu, north of Salalah, on the mountains near to the tomb of Nebi Ayub, and I collected further specimens here.
I collected the midges with an apparatus called a pooter, or aspirator. I sucked these into a little jar or tube and put the specimens, I believe, either in ethanol or in another chemical to preserve them. and I sent them to the Natural History Museum in Oman, from where they were sent to the UK, with specimens being kept at the British Natural History Museum, and also sent to the Institute of Animal Virology at Pirbright in the UK, where a specialist in midges, Mr. John Borman, was working. He examined these insects more closely and decided from his expert knowledge of the taxonomy of midges that these were a new species not previously described, and he therefore examined them more closely and wrote up a description of them and decided to call them Forcipomyia, Lasiohelea, whitcombei. So that I would prefer to call them the Dhofar biting midge.
Airnout, the local name in the Jabali language, or Hamouche in Arabic, are all names for midges in a particular family of flies called Ceratopogonidae, which feed on blood. This family has approximately 6,000 species, divided into around 110 genera. The most famous here in Oman is Forcipomyia whitcombei. It is the most widespread and most common in Dhofar Governorate. Insects in this genus typically lay 7 groups of eggs, and each group has around 450 eggs. So in its life, an adult female midge may lay about 3,000 eggs. The female midge lays the eggs on wet surfaces, such as mud and animal dung. Eggs hatch in around 1 to 2 days to a week. The larvae stay in wet mud or dung for 2 weeks, and they could stay up to a year if the circumstances are not ideal for their growth. When each larva is fully grown, it turns into a pupa. After a few days, an adult midge emerges from the pupa. The adult females soon start to seek a blood meal. Why blood? Because it is the main source of protein. People often refer to the Dhofar midge as a mosquito. However, the biting midges belong to another family that is called Ceratopogonidae. The adult insect is annoying because it sucks blood, but the larval stage is beneficial for the environment because it breaks down organic waste, both dung left by animals on the ground and other organic matter in the soil. Some adult midges are also important for the environment because they are pollinators of plants, including trees. This midge is widespread in Dhofar and in large numbers because we have animals grazing, cattle, goats and camels in the mountains. These animals leave dung in their grazing areas, and this provides suitable substrate for the midges to lay their eggs and the midge larvae to grow. And because the adult midge is a blood-sucking insect, the livestock play an essential role in the reproduction of midges, which need blood to make eggs.
I have come here to the Pirbright Institute in Surrey in the UK to meet Dr. Marion England, who is a specialist in insect and vector-borne diseases. She's going to tell us a little bit more about the research she does and the research of the Institute and how this is relevant to Dhofar and the midges that cause a problem to tourists and other people in the region.
I'm Dr. Marion England and I'm a research fellow in vector ecology at the Pirbright Institute. The Pirbright Institute is a world-leading research centre for livestock viruses. Diseases of livestock threaten global food security, and Pirbright's research seeks to understand the viruses, their structure and function, and how these interact with the animal and its immune system. We do this and then we develop vaccines and control measures to mitigate against these disease threats. Some viral diseases of animals and humans can be transmitted by insects such as biting midges, ticks and mosquitoes. And in this regard, they're called vectors. So my research is into looking at the vector ecology, understanding more about the life cycle of these insects and their behaviour. And this helps us to understand more about the role they play in disease transmission. This is relevant to Dhofar as there are a number of biting insects in the region that are a nuisance to both animals and humans, and some may be able to transmit pathogens. So the females will take a blood meal from a range of different hosts. These could be humans, livestock. Some species are much more specific than others about what they will feed on. Some will only feed on birds, some will only feed on mammals, and others are less fussy. So over the last 30 to 40 years, the livestock population has increased significantly in the region of Dhofar. So this is likely to have benefited the midge population in two different ways. Firstly, a greater number of animals around provides a greater availability of a blood meal for the females. And secondly, the animals themselves will be enriching the soil, which will benefit the midge breeding sites. It is possible that the midge population has increased in recent years, but it's more likely that there's more tourists going to the area and therefore we're noticing the midge population more. It's unlikely that tourists are playing a role in sustaining the population of midges. It's far more likely that livestock are involved in creating a suitable habitat for them. So there are various methods of control for midges, but most of them would not be appropriate across such a wide area. So you could set up midge traps, but you'd knock out such a tiny fraction of the local population, and the surrounding midges would just move in to fill the gap straight away. So other methods could be the use of insecticides or spraying in the area, but this really, again, doesn't have a significant impact. It's very short term, it does huge environmental damage, and there's so many non-target species that you're going to knock out. And again, it's such a large area to cover, it's just not a practical option. It would be great to be able to do further research into these insects to understand better what hosts that they feed on, and then we'd have a better idea if they're capable of disease transmission in livestock or humans. We can collect midges from Dhofar, ones that have recently taken a blood meal, and then we can extract the host DNA from their bodies. We can sequence it and find out what they've been feeding on. We can also screen the midges for the presence of pathogens such as viruses. If we understand more about this midge and its ecology, we have the potential to look at livestock management practices and see if they can be adjusted to control the population. In other regions of the world, such as Scotland, where tourism is impacted by large midge populations, it hasn't been possible to eradicate the midge or to reduce its numbers significantly. And the best way to protect yourself against biting is by wearing long-sleeved clothing and using repellents and timing your visits to when the midges are least active.
Also, he or she can apply, according to my tests, some form of plant-based oils. One of them is clove oil. Clove oil, from my experience, can clear the itch within minutes. In 5 or 10 minutes, he or she won't notice the bite spots, nor feel the itch.
نتكن بالطفل الطفل في موسم الخرف ويحسب بس يلا يعني بموسمها الموجود سخي لكيس رب العالمين لتوازن معين نتكن طير مو بحلاك من تلث ثيرته بطلب خرفي يوهيري صراحة بعجبي عير عن سخيرين بوتيت شلا يقدد عين من تلي راح يكين بينك بعفاء نوت بذبوت بهليلي لان كالخرفوتي خل كسنول دهر محافظة القدردين بالذات يطلب تزود قدرتي يطلبليس يحق يوم وثلاث بوضع قدردين يوقع لين بدأ يتطيش من خرف بخير حكيت هردين بيت هير حملات بهر حلا وضع ذانو مطلوب ما استنكع بخبراء بيوم متمكنين من وضع ذا لدورس بيقربش عار مشكلة بعر خلال التوازن البيئي ذا.
This insect is part of a very complex food chain. For example, elsewhere, the cacao tree relies heavily on other species of Forcipomyia for pollination. Perhaps some of Dhofar's special plants benefit from pollination by midges. The Arabian Peninsula has many different midge species, and there is another Forcipomyia species in Al-Hijr mountain chain, known as Forcipomyia Lasiohelea baltea. A reliable monsoon season in Dhofar, creating a seasonal cloud forest and grassland, has provided suitable conditions for man and livestock. These provide habitat for midge larvae and blood for adult females. As a result, midges are both widespread and locally abundant in Dhofar. Nature is important and complex, and we have to be careful to find a good balance between looking after people and their livestock and the environment on which we all depend. In the end, we should not disrupt the food chain of nature.